Live intro. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Now, how can I make the categorical statement? All the thousands, tens of thousands of people that are watching now and will be watching as you share this with at least 5 people. That's what we ask. Share it, love the podcast, and keep it growing, because thank God our audience keeps growing, because this is the most informative an important discussion about an institution that is a foundational aspect of living well. And if this foundational aspect of living well continues to be attacked and falls, then it is literally the fall of Western civilization. And we don't want that, because that just creates all kinds of difficulties. I mean, talk about hunger and war and pestilence and such. Oh my gosh, that's what's happening the past couple of years. We won't go there. So we're talking today, of course, about marriage with joy. We have a particular subject today. I have to be a little delicate in some of the things we're going to be talking about with our wonderful, amazing panelist, Dr. Diane Medved, up in the great Northwest, and wonderful Maura Sweeney in the great Southeast. She's the ambassador of happiness, and our yet to be announced Lori McDermott, who's in the Southern California area and right along the coast in the craziest part of America. And your humble host, Barry Shore, the ambassador of joy here in Henderson, Nevada. Yes, I have chosen to relocate, uproot from Venice Beach, where it was wonderful at one time, right, Diane? And now living in the desert, which, by the way, is absolutely splendid. I'm sorry, it's just so quiet and pleasant and clean and nice. And you would, and aside from the fact that we have to look at the news and social media and war and pestilence and things like that, it would just be an idyllic situation. But and we're going to introduce the topic today. So the topic is something I sent out to everybody, and I found it to be fascinating. Even though it's a bit of pop psychology, I think it actually has validity. But that's what I want to ask you, because those are the kinds of questions that I am soliciting from people on a regular basis. We get lots and lots of emails, lots and lots of comments. Most of the time, people love what we do. Sometimes, of course, they say no, they take us to task and say, well, you should have been stronger, or you didn't say this. Fine. But the interesting one now, as I sent it out, is this, as I said, in quotation marks, pop psychology idea of somebody, her name is, what is her name? Sarah Al-Madani. And apparently she's in quotations, an influencer. She has hundreds of thousands of followers, if not millions, interesting enough. And she mentioned something from her, what she called her best friend, whose name is Mona Katan, K-A-T-T-A-N, which is very interesting because it's a very Jewish name, and it means the small Mona. Katan means small. So, we're out there, people are talking. Thank God women are still interacting. And the quotation is as follows. And again, it has to do with our discussion. This is called Marriage with Joy. It's not just about marriage, and it's not about the institution. It's about the process of what marriage does for the two people that are involved. Now, again, if you're talking about a group marriage, you have to go to a different podcast. We're talking about a marriage that's involved with two people, primarily a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. Of course, there are other marriages, other relationships. We're talking primarily about man and woman, but anything that creates a lasting, loving, and how should we say it, nurturing home, I'm in favor of. That's my personal, I'm just telling you, from a biblical point of view, I'd probably be thrown out of my church or synagogue. But from my personal point of view, Oh, I won't sing the song. All right. Suffice it to say, I believe in loving, nurturing, kind environments. And whatever does make that happen between two people, I think is fine. The interesting quotation or idea that was talked about by Sarah from her friend Mona is the following: marriage is about finding a fireplace and not looking for a firecracker. I'll say it the other way. Marriage is not about being a firecracker or finding a firecracker, but finding a fireplace. Now, the analogy is quite obvious, I think, but I'll spell it out for people who are slow in the uptake, like me, maybe. Guys are more like that than women. Is that, yes, as much as the, how should we call it, that unique spark that everybody loves every once in a while, because that's life. You do want and have sparks. Really, the best situation is someplace that brings about a feeling of safety, a feeling of heaven, a feeling of a haven, and done in a way that is not sloppy, that is not taking advantage of the other person, or what I call holes in the sweater type of environment, where you don't care what it is that you look like or how you speak. On the contrary, you are cognizant of the fact that the person that you are living with and building something with, and hopefully there are children and such and grandchildren and all kinds of generations, that person is elevated in your eyes, not diminished, not diminished, diminished. And the difference is, of course, of how you speak to one another, how you behave with one another. Can you possibly still open the door, a car door, for the other person? Which I did once in a while with my wife recently, and she loved it. She criticized me about something, but that's a different story. But the point is that the idea of firecracker does not get eliminated, but the idea of fireplace gets top billing. So I'm going to throw that out as not as so much as a question, but as a comment, and asking you, Diane, because you're our leadoff batter all the time, to comment on it. And if you find it refreshing, you find it invigorating, you find it useful, you say, no, that's just too blatantly silly. You're up, kid.
Well, I think that it's obvious. Clearly, if you're going to make a marriage, you're going to look for, as Mona said, look for a fireplace and not the firecracker. The idea being that if you're going to make a marriage, this is a long-term commitment. This is your life. This is something that you are going to create. You're going to make the home around the fireplace, and the two of you will be sharing that, and you will create that together. And the future is all about making this environment in which you can always feel comfortable, and you can always bring your innermost self, and you can share life, and you can bring other people like your children into the world and into the room and into your style of love. And so, yes, I mean, who could ever disagree with that? Firecracker's great. I think she was implying sexual excitement. Yeah, I agree with you, Barry, that that's important to continue and not lose attention to. But at the same time, a home and a marriage has to be about the long term. Fireplace is part of a home, is part of something that's got a foundation and that you will build around it and that you will come back to day after day. As you mentioned, your safe haven, the place from which your heart is settled and comfortable. Now, I wanted to add to that, though, when I saw that video about you should look for a firecracker and a fireplace and not a firecracker, that will help you in everything you do, because so many things that we do have a momentary excitement and yet have long-term negative consequences. And no matter what we do, including what we say, the words that come out of our mouth should be not just for the effect that they have that moment, but you have to look to the long-term possible impact of the words you say. That's why I find so much obscenity in our culture to be not beneficial to us. because it brings us down overall. And even though one time saying the F word is not going to change anything, if you make that a habitual part of your character, then you become that kind of lowered person. And so I think that this is wise advice for marriage, for bringing joy to marriage, for bringing joy to your children, and for making your life one that is more uplifted and has more important consequences. The fireplace is about consequences, long-term commitment, caring, basic values, whereas the firecracker is the momentary thrill. And those are great, but you should see them as punctuation to a life built around the fireplace.
We love listening to Dr. Diane. I'd like to unpack a couple things that you mentioned and go ask wonderful Maura to expound from her perspective. And yes, the LTC component, long-term commitment, is, let's be blunt, it's the bedrock of the marriage process. Now, we used to call it marriage vows, which are wonderful, because when you vow something, you mean you're taking it more seriously. The ability to have commitment in a very transitory world, or a world where people are encouraged to think in a transitory manner. That's really what's happening, I think, in today's environment. I'm going to bring up something because you did mention it, and we have to talk about it. And I hesitate only because I prefer another word, but we're going to use the word sex for the moment. And personally, I prefer the word intimacy, as I think all of us do. And the difference in tone and understanding is really relevant. The reason I bring it up, though, is because two things happened to me in the past month, in addition to the fact, unfortunately, that we are all, at least most of us, are besieged because of the terrible war situation in the state of Israel and the battle that is going on in the world because of it. I mean, the slaughter, the inhumanity, it's astounding to even talk about it because it hurts so much. It rips the very soul out of the being. And I think that it does have an analogous aspect to America. So I just tell you what happened to me recently. My wife pointed out one of these and I saw the other one. So I'm a religious reader of the Wall Street Journal. I am religious and I read it religiously. And the Wall Street Journal had an article on October the 3rd, just before the world fell apart. And the essential, let me just see, bear with me. I think I have the actual title right here. I'll be right back. Yes, smartphones have turbocharged the danger of porn. And the subtitle is, since the 1960s, the taboo against pornography has almost disappeared. Now it's easily available to anyone with a phone. The personal and societal costs can no longer be denied. That's a long-winded way of saying the following. Like you mentioned about speech, Diane. Coarse speech coarsens the being. That's a given. I think almost everybody would understand that. Except, you ready for this? The people who use coarse speech. They don't even realize that they're coarsening themselves and everything around them. Second thing is, and my wife pointed out, and if there is a wonderful word called prudish in the most positive sense, my wife is the essence, in my humble opinion, of prudish. She comes from a completely different culture. Granted, she's been living in America for so many decades now, it's almost she doesn't even remember, but she was raised in a very different atmosphere in the Orient. Very, very rigid, very specific, went to a specific girls' school, and from a different background. So she pointed out to me something I never heard of until a few weeks ago. What is it called again? OnlyFans. OnlyFans. So I only mentioned it because she showed me about this article, and I didn't know what it was. And if you're not aware of it, I'm happy to. I'm glad neither of you are aware of it. I'm sure out of the thousands of people that are listening to us, there are a number of them. What is it? It is it's a site where someone personally can perform overt sexual things in front of the camera for people for money. Now, why do I mention it? again, I feel dirty even talking about it. So here's what the article she showed me, that it was a teacher, I don't remember the state, a teacher who went on OnlyFans and has earned in the past 9 months, 11 months, over $1 million. And because of that, she quit her job as a teacher. She was a teacher of kids. And she didn't quit her job as a teacher because she felt, well, that's a betrayal of my teaching. Like, no, I'm making so much money, I don't need to teach. But what am I doing? I am performing things that people say, I want you to do this to yourself. And that, it's voyeurism on the highest level. And again, the article from the Wall Street Journal mentions that this is now accessible for anybody that has one of these smartphones. And it's free. Or I assume it's free. Maybe you have to pay. I don't know. Oh, no, you have to pay something because obviously the woman made money doing this, so that she shares the amount. But the point of the Wall Street Journal article is that the taboo is no longer a taboo. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is no barrier to entry for this kind of activity. And when you think about boys, I was a boy. In some levels, I'm still a boy. I'm a grown man. I'm 74, but I'm still a boy at heart. And I do boyish things. Well, that's what boys are. Boys are actually voyeurs. Change the B to a V and you get a boyer. He's a voyeur. I mean, that's because boys are inquisitive, especially when it comes to girls. When there's no barrier, instead of a magazine with a staple in it called Playboy, which is compared to, now is benign. So now what are you doing? You're taking this wonderful situation that you mentioned, Diane, long-term commitment, consequences, caring. Those are all words that are laden with meaning. They're solid. They put down, they make you put down roots and feel foundational. Whereas this stuff is the ultimate. It's not even a firecracker, because it's pure sex. There cannot be intimacy in pornography. It's all they're oil and water. I hope I'm correct. I don't want me to go too far on this, but I'm using what you said about these words. Long-term, commitment, caring, consequences. If you eliminate those from your vocabulary, I mean not just your words, but your thoughts and your deeds, then it's impossible to enter into marriage, and certainly to have marriage with joy, because it can't be. They can't coexist. So with that as an introduction, wonderful Maura, I'd like you to speak to what we just said about the concept of firecracker and fireplace, and in a very changing cultural environment. And as you said to me just before we came on the show, tell people about what you see what you saw at a school, and what it means for the ability for people to enter into something called a long-term commitment.
Okay. Can I make you laugh, both of you, and maybe anybody who's watching today? You mentioned this woman, Sarah Aldemanic, and I'm like, wait a minute, did he send something new to me that I didn't see? And I remember you sent something previously, and I watch, I study, I take notes, and I'm like, this girl's name is not ringing a bell. But as soon as you said, and I was even looking her up, like, who is she? Anyway, I do remember it was a very quick video she put together, or a quick
they call it a reel. It's an Instagram reel.
And you know what? It was so quick. I have to tell you, I liked it because I think there was something very practical and very enduring to it. Now, I'm glad you referenced some of the things you did, Barry, about not having the fireplace where everybody's wearing their lumberjack clothes, hanging around and, cleaning their teeth with a piece of wood. Not that. But here's what came to mind. The firecracker is sometimes the world we're taught to live in, which is get an instant high, get drama. That was the first thought that came to mind. People who are attracted only to the firecracker, and I know you're saying it means people are attracted physically to one another, but if it's the firecracker you are looking for, you attract yourself to another firecracker. I've seen this happen in couples. We have a set of friends of ours who were married and they were two firecrackers, very much attracted, but attracted in that fashion. They ended up being so destructive to each other, divorced, but the good news is they got back together, and guess what they are now? Now they have a fireplace. That they had to get rid of it. The drama was destroying them. It would get higher and higher and higher, the arguments, the polarization, ripping each other apart. It's something I find in today's society, probably from social media, from movies, everything else. Everything's got to be something awful that you're going to get mad at somebody, you're going to get back at someone. So if I could say the things about the fireplace that attracted me, and I guess it depends on what kind of a fireplace you envision, I saw a very intimate place called home, quiet, relaxing. And I want to use the word intimate, whether it's two people sitting together on a couch, eye to eye with a glass of wine, or there are other children around. There's people visiting. You can share stories. Things are quiet and relaxing, and could also be a lot of fun because you're in the same environment where you've created your own atmosphere. So I saw home, I saw intimacy, and I saw warmth when I was listening to this girl on her short or her reel. And as soon as she mentioned the idea of the firecracker, that was what I came up in mind with, was friends of ours who really were firecrackers and destroying each other. And also it was very challenging for their only son, who was so sensitive and was always caught up in the latest drama. So I would be a person that would veer toward the fireplace, but I think there's a lot of romance in a fireplace. There's enduring atmosphere in that kind of a place. There's safety in that environment. And the other piece I was going to say to when you started talking about some of these other things going on in society, and how much the standards have come down. And everywhere you look, we see things that bring society down rather than bringing it up. Is that somewhere, and I say this probably every month that we're on, we individually on this program, as well as those who are listening and interested in marriage, take it upon ourselves to be the local influencers. We're influences in our home. We're influences with our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, the school that we have our children at, the community that we live in. We invite people over, and what we do is we lift them up. And Diane, when you talked about the language, something came to mind in one of my previous lifetimes when I was in corporate leadership, and that change in language was coming in. I remember saying to some people that would come in from other offices, maybe to address our group, I would say, do you know in this group, we only have the highly intelligent people that come to speak. So I said, I know you've got more in your vocabulary and more creativity when you want to use an adjective, that you could come up with something better than 4-letter words. And we're all waiting for it. And so I would actually use humor as a means of bringing the more coarse personalities up. And I will tell you, by setting the standard, setting the stage without being persnickety, people actually told me, they said, Maura, there's something here that feels so much better. It's safer. It's more assuring in that you can actually be more of yourself. You can bring down your own barriers when you don't have that coarseness around. Coarse language oftentimes is a barrier between ourselves and others. And when you don't really have the coarse language, people feel safer to reveal parts of their heart, their more tender aspects, and people are very elevated as a result. So I don't know if I got a little off.
No, you're spot on. You gave me some wonderful words to unpack here for people that are listening, and I think they dovetail very nicely with what Diane was saying about long-term commitment and such. And you mentioned, of course, the words drama, and usually trauma goes along with drama, just the nature of the beast. And I want to go into something that you mentioned specifically, because what happens with people who argue or bicker, I just realized something funny. Let's be very blunt. People today are no different than people 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Human beings, human nature. There used to be a show that when I was a kid, okay, that goes back now, 60 years. Most people listening, they're not even half that age. You should know that, by the way. Most of our listening audience, thank God, is under the age of 35. They have no idea some of the things we've been talking about, but they listen anyway because they like the idea, okay, upbeat, marriage, joy, well, why not? But they tell me that. I said, I don't understand some of your references. That's because we don't understand this. But there was a show that was on when I was a kid that my parents listened to, and I found it fascinating only because of the title. The name of the show was called The Bickersons. And what were they? They were as a couple that bickered. That's what they were. They were the Bickersons. And it was funny. It was back and forth, one-liners and zingers and such. Obviously, not coarse, but back and forth. And so I'm thinking of that when you mention about one of the things that I like when I think of the idea of a fireplace. And in Venice, we had a wood-burning fireplace, which you can't even build a home. Diane, you had wood-burning fireplaces in Santa Monica, right? You can't build a wood-burning fireplace I think in all of Los Angeles, but certainly on the west side of Los Angeles where we used to live. You can't do it today. And even when we had the house, the last 15, 18, 20 years, we were encouraged not to burn logs. Matter of fact, firewood places were gone. So we burned these fake logs, which was nice. They gave off a glow and such. My point is the following, that you mentioned about somebody saying something, and in a fireplace environment, in contrast to a firecracker environment, if your spouse says something to you that you don't like, they did it, even if they did it as a dig, and they meant to cause you a little bit of pain and such as that. If you're really oriented towards building a fireplace and living with joy, well, guess what? So what? So do I like it? My wife says something to me that I don't like about me. Yeah. But to also end up laughing and saying, well, yeah, Barry, that's the way you are. Get over it. So I don't like it when she does that, because I only want her to tell me how handsome and rich and wonderful and kind and generous and loving I am. But that doesn't always happen, because sometimes I say things that I didn't really think I meant to say. And so, but we're not going to let that create drama and trauma, because it's a fireplace environment. In other words, it's a home. And I think the name of the word is, I like to veer away from comfortable, because I like being uncomfortable, because I think that helps people grow in life. But I think it's more towards the idea of overused word, authentic. You can actually be authentic, whatever your authentic self is. I mean, by the way, let's be blunt. I'm 74 chronologically. So it's taking me 74 years. Okay, I've been working on myself for 60. So 60 plus years to get to a point where I actually really am me, whatever the me is. Because you get to a point where you don't want to carry around that burden anymore of saying, well, who's that? Who needs that, right? I love my wife. My wife loves me. I know it. So I don't have to do anything that's other than me. I love it. I'm going to say a quick quote, and then we're going to, if you can speak to it, great. And if you can't, that'd be okay also. But I'm going to tell you something that I heard recently, I think it was about 3 years ago. And I'll say it and I hope it comes out clear. Are you ready, Diane? You ready, Maura? Here we go. I think it's clear. It's clear to me, but I hope it's clear to you. If I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I'm not I and you're not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, we can actually begin to have a conversation. Should I repeat it? I mean, you got it, right?
Diane looks like she got it better than I did.
I think I got it, but I don't know if I agree with it. because I think I and you are constantly evolving, and that the combination of I and you is a whole third entity that is not I and that is not you. And that conversation, even as we speak, I was telling my granddaughter that I was going to do this webinar today. And
How old is your granddaughter?
the one I was talking to is 6, my eldest grandchild.
Okay.
And I told her, they asked me questions and then I give an answer. And she said, well, do you think about it in advance? And I said to her, some of it I think about as I'm beginning, but as I speak, other things come to me. And this is sort of, to me, an analogy of how we are as we change over time, even within a conversation, but more broadly, we have a bedrock respect for each other. You start with that. You start with the respect and the commitment. Mm-hmm. And then you have room to develop or retract or change who you are depending on your mood or that day or the events that have happened to you. There's all kinds of change that is built into any relationship. And if you can see that I is not I and you is not you permanently as one thing that doesn't change, but that we're constantly ebbing and flowing and changing, growing, retracting, losing, gaining. If you can accept that movement in the relationship, you're going to be better off. And I wanted to add one other thing about what you said before, Barry, about how to take criticism or a fact about you that you don't like and you don't want to confront. I don't know why. I'm just kind of like a lughead, but people can say negative things to me or slights, and I don't even notice it. And it isn't because I'm so self-confident. It's probably because I'm so stupid. But
no, you can't talk that way about my friend.
But I don't find that. I mean, I find this to be a good kind of stupid because I see that only good comes from people around me. And I don't see coming from them anything negative. And so I assume if they say something, first of all, it usually goes over my head. When I work with clients as a psychologist, I call it a rubber bumper. You just, all the time, just keep the rubber bumper around you. And then when something, a zing comes at you, it just bounces back. You don't have to internalize it, let it pass the bumper and go into your soul or your heart or make you angry or anything. Just assume good, and then bad can bounce off. And so when we're talking about building a fireplace and making a home and having a relationship with joy, the relationship with joy is the bedrock of respect and love and admiration. And then from there, expecting change, moment to moment, day to day, back and forth, and being there to give your partner a place to experience the joy and to be an Ezer Kenegdo, a helpmate opposite you that can bounce ideas back and forth and keep the negativity bounced off of yourself.
So let's unpack a couple of things. So it's first of all, it's very good. I use that phrase, the I, you, because I found it fascinating, and it's a good place to jump off, and you gave it nice context. And again, when my wife does criticize me, the good news is I don't take it personally as an attack. I only take it as something good. Matter of fact, I'll actually even listen. She may be telling me something I should know. Duh. Which is very nice. You know, maybe the tone was not okay. So, and I appreciate that. That's a very wonderful point. I must tell you, Diane, for those of you who are watching, you're gaining something wonderful. If you're only listening, it's still good. But when you were saying words, you were moving arms as well. It's the dance of life. It's that ebb and flow, that movement, that change that is, look, who doesn't like going to the seashore and listening to the waves come in and out, right? It's a pleasure. It's something fascinating. Even if there's a storm going on, by the way, not just on a mile, but there's something happening. And that happening is coming from a place that we call benefit. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. I love it, but I just so enjoyed that dance. It's a delight. Okay, wonderful, Maura. So again, you can use the I, you, or I am not you, I am not I, and jump off wherever you want. What you think about it?
I will, because you started losing me when you got to the third line. I'm like, whoa, I better listen to this again. But I'll tell you what I felt about this. I wanted to come up with the word dynamism. And this is probably jumping off what Diane said. As an individual, we all grow and we become more and more of ourselves. But in a marriage, there is, and let's say a healthy, happy, long-term marriage, where you are living with and growing with another person over the course of time, there's usually a dynamism that develops, a certain synergy. And it really keeps an energy going and flowing within the relationship that I think makes it more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I'm with other people, I may be a little bit different than I am at home with my husband. I can be most like myself when I'm with him. He's the same with me. But the part of it too is that because we have similar interests and then we have some different interests and different pursuits, we will both do our own thing. Then we come back together. And it's that ability to interact with new things we're learning, new ideas, new areas in which we're growing, that we help the other person grow and change. So really, we may be I and him, or he and I, or whatever those two pronouns were, but there's a dynamism, a synergy, and a growth that just continues to go along. And it almost is, it has its own life to it. And it's more than just one and one. It's maybe when Diane was saying you have another entity, it's the two of you together. And over the long haul, as you've got two people that are always growing and learning and exploring new things and sharing with one another, there is a special dynamism that you don't have if you are just the one and the one.
So I want to mention, because you both use the term, and I want to emphasize it. And I think this is what disturbs me most about this article I told you from the Wall Street Journal about the pornography on a phone, or this particular situation with this teacher. And apparently she's not alone. There are thousands of these, mostly women, that are just doing things because people pay them to do something. And again, it doesn't allow for time to invest in learning. In other words, Diane, you said you have doing I don't know if it was a webinar or a Zoom call with, say, your granddaughter, and that's time that you have allocated to be with this wonderful being. And let's be blunt. Do you know more than she does? Well, duh. By the same token, you can learn because of the way you interact with her, of what can touch her, what stimulates her, and she to you. And like you mentioned just now, Maura, you and Jimmy, to be able to sit down in the same room, let's say, and you're both either with a glass of wine or you're both reading different books. But you every once in a while you're saying, you know, I was want to share with you something I just read here. I was thinking about this. If you're in the firecracker stage, or you're in that thing they call pornography, which is the ultimate distraction, that's really what it's about. Mm-hmm. Ultimate distraction. You don't have the benefit of that roaring fireplace, even if it's only figurative, where that safety, that ability to say, look up from what you're doing and communicate to another human being. Imagine that. And that, I think, is what really, why people tune into what we're doing here, by the way. We're talking about marriage with joy. And is it about tickling? I happen to like tickling. So yes, it is about pillow fights every once in a while. Okay, I haven't had one in 10 years, but still, remember doing pillow fights. It's the ability to interact and to learn something together. We are not static beings. Now, we are blessed, Diane and I, in our households in the Jewish world, because every single week it's a religious obligation, actually, to delve into certain chapters in the Bible. and to ask questions and to discuss. Well, when you're asking questions, guess what happens? You are stimulating yourself. That's the ultimate firecracker, right? Thought. What does this mean? I don't know. What do you think? Oh, well, I'll tell you what I think. No, you don't get it. Okay, you can argue, I mean, in the most positive way, right? But it's something that allows you both to focus on something. It's the ability for me to, people ask me, what is this marriage with joy? I get asked every once in a while because people have heard about it. They've tuned in. I was recently at a place. Oh, I'm trying to remember. I was giving a talk someplace, and I think there were 35, 40 people in the audience. And one of them raised and say, Mr. Shore, I saw you on this show. And they told all the other people about it and say, yeah, it's a great show. Just the fact that you're interacting with other human beings and learning and discussing, that is, to me, the ultimate fireplace. The firecracker comes and somebody says, what do you think? You want to know what I think? Okay, I'll tell you what I think because you asked me. And even if you didn't ask me, I might even tell you. But the point is that we want to be involved with learning. The genius of how you began, Diane, with this whole process of long-term commitment is the ability to grow, to learn, to be involved in even thinking about myself and how I can be better. Because guess what? I love you. I mean, I'm talking to my wife. Are you talking to your husband? Talking to a friend? I love you. I love you. Therefore, I want to be better. Am I correct on this? I mean, if I'm not, let me know. We only have a few more minutes, but I just want to finish this particular segment, Diane, by that, because both you and Maura mentioned it, is the ability to be involved with growth, with learning, and being better. I mean, why not? If I'm better today than I was yesterday, doesn't that help a lot of people, self-included? Right?
I tell my husband his most sexy organ is his brain. But that's reinforcing what you're saying, is that when you have mental stimulation, intellectual stimulation, anger over a point of something, and that is exciting. And
right.
We can use our minds and not just our tactile sensations to have excitement.
Right. And I think that is to me, that's what that article in the Wall Street Journal was about, with the danger of what this is, that it's too easy to make it a distraction and touch the lowest part of the self, not the highest part. Like you said, the sexiest part is the mind, is the interaction. And again, you have almost the last word, wonderful Maura, in terms, because you brought it up about the idea about learning and sitting with each other and talking.
And I think I want to circle back to this whole issue again about, I guess it was Diane who started with the coarse language. You were referring also
to use coarse language. Oh my gosh, I'm surprised at you, Diane.
No, not.
And you know what? I don't know if I ever mentioned this when I was in high school. When people graduate, they'll have the best artist, the most, I don't know, the best actor. I got most dignified. They didn't even have a title like that, but they made it up for me. So I tended to come out of that kind of an environment. But in listening to all of this, although I did not know the name of that site, I have heard the story of that teacher, or a similar story, where you're saying there are no taboos today. Everything that was considered taboo, things you wouldn't even discuss, are now out there and everywhere. People are unapologetic. In fact, it's the opposite. People are proud about it. There's no awareness. But let's go back to the original idea of, do you want to have a firecracker relationship or a fireplace? This whole thing about bringing people down to their most base animal instinct, it's all about the sex, is so antithetical to a long-term healthy relationship and marriage, because it never lifts a person up beyond the animal instinct. And I would think, if that's all we reduce ourselves to, and somebody else has a more active libido somewhere else, then we're going to run there, and there is nothing that keeps us together. But when you do have the other elements of your personality and your nature and your emotions and your mind and your thoughts and your, I even want to say your imagination, and you put that into a relationship, now you've come from a coarse piece of stone into a diamond that's been polished. And over the course of a marriage, you can really continue to develop that and think, I don't want to spend my time in front of the fireplace with anybody else. I really like this person. And yet another person who's busy on one of those apps would maybe they're 500 people down the pike. So that's my feeling, that all of those elements sort of come together when we look to lift ourselves up on a number of levels. It's a good
And that, of course, is the essence of marriage with joy, because joy stands for journey of you. And that's really what we're discussing here. This whole idea of commitment, of caring, of consequence, of eliminating drama, and allowing the interaction of uplifting words and benefit to each other, creating an atmosphere that, as Diane, as you pointed out so nicely, it's not just in the home. That it just extends everywhere. That is how you live. You are a fireplace. Now, people can also call you a firecracker in the good sense, because you're a spark and things happen. The ability to be that warmth, that safety, that haven, that invites the ability to learn and to grow and to nurture. Well, that's really what this is all about. And I personally am so thankful to you, Diane, and to you, Maura, and to you, Lori. We missed you today. And to all the thousands of people who watch and listen to us. And thank you for sending in letters and comments and such. We appreciate it. So as we do, of course, on the end of the show, we give a big hug and a blessing. So we'll start with the blessing, then we'll go to the hug. And our blessing is, go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad, go make a difference. And of course, our big hug is heartfelt, unlimited giving. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Best wishes, everybody. Thank you. Bye. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.